Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. Today we are doing a counterintelligence precon review. Should you buy this? Does it have the bang for a buck? And is it even playable out of the box? That's all things we're going to be talking about today. We are also going to be talking about all the new cards in the precon. If you guys haven't seen those yet, we're going to be talking about them. I will have a timestamp, that way you can skip that part if you've already seen those new cards, and you can get directly into the deck review, what the deck is trying to do, how it wins, how it's going to play, and additionally what commander we're going to use to best get our bang for buck out of this precon. We're going to be talking about that all today. I'm even going to throw in a little bit of some upgrade suggestions at the end of the video, just in case you guys want to go ahead and get some of those. I am also going to have a dedicated upgrade video coming out very shortly. If it's already been made, it will be in the pinned comments down below. With that being said, guys, go ahead and check out all those links. I've got a free $15 for you in the form of a whatnot link. Additionally, you guys can get 10% off all of your Tolarian library proxies whenever you use code DT4D. And last but not least, if you guys would just like, comment, and subscribe, I really appreciate it. It helps the channel, and to show my support, I will go ahead and reply to all those comments in the comment section down below. Now, let's get right into this precon upgrade. Precon review. My bad. Let's kick it off by talking about the 10 new cards in this precon. The first two can be your commander. We have Inspirit Flagship. This is a 3 CMC legendary artifact spacecraft in Jeskai colors. It has the station ability, which means you can tap a creature and add an amount of charge counters equal to that creature's power to this spacecraft. And then at 8 charge counters, this is going to become an artifact creature. Notably, that's how you can tell if a spacecraft can be your commander or not. One, if it has power and toughness in the rules text, and another way is it will flat tell you at 8 this comes an artifact creature. Now at +1 we do get an ability. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn you get your choice of a 1/1 counter or 2 charge counters on up to 1 other target artifact. So we can either buff up an artifact or put more charge counters on it. It also at 8 gets flying, and other artifacts you control have hexproof and indestructible. Now this is pretty good because one, it protects our entire board, but what it doesn't protect is itself. That means it puts a giant target on this ship to just get destroyed, and then you can start tearing apart all the other important pieces on the board. It does add one step to before they can start doing that, but again, that is one glaring kind of flaw to running this as your commander. It's going to have a giant target on it, and then whenever you remove it, you have to recrew it up and do all that stuff, right? The next commander is the one that I favor for helming this deck. It's Kylo, again, a 3 CMC legendary artifact creature, robot artificer in Jeskai colors. And then it says, whenever Kylo becomes tapped, you get to proliferate. It seems so simple, but so powerful at the same time with all of the other cards that are in the deck. Additionally, it does have haste. I will say though, there's not a ton of ways to tap Kylo without actually attacking, which I'm not a huge fan of, so we will have to add some cards that tap him just by giving him the ability to tap for mana, or there's other artifacts that allow you to tap a creature to add mana to your mana pool. I don't want to be really attacking with this guy constantly because that puts him at risk at just being blocked and dying because he's only a 3/3. So you get protection with one commander, but the other commander's an insane value engine with the rest of the deck that we're going to talk about later on in this video. The next card we're talking about is going to see a ton of play. I'm super excited for this one. It's Insight Engine. It's a 3 CMC blue artifact, and again, I think this is going to see a lot of play because of its power. It mimics another card that's super powerful, and you're going to know exactly the card I'm going to talk about when I read off what this card does. You can pay 2 to tap it and put a charge counter on this artifact, then draw cards equal to the amount of charge counters on it. Sounds like the One Ring, right? It basically is, but you have to pay for it. Like a fair One Ring, but you don't actually have to lose life whenever we're drawing cards on our upkeep, and it goes insane with Unwinding Clock. So if we put Unwinding Clock in this deck, it untaps all of our artifacts at every single player's upkeep, right? This means we get to untap the Insight Engine 4 times, and as long as we have 2 artifacts that can generate mana, we can easily untap our 2 signets, tap them down, tap down Insight Engine, draw 2 cards, 3 cards, 4 cards, and by the time it gets back to our turn, we're drawing 5 cards off of this thing, and we've already drawn 2, 3, so 5, and then 4. So we're 9 cards deep at this point. This card is absolutely insane, and it's not hard to see why I think it's going to see a lot of play. So this Precon's probably worth picking up just for that card, in my opinion. If it is restricted to blue, so it's not as powerful as the One Ring, but I'm just saying, really good in your artifact decks that are already playing Unwinding Clock. I'm definitely going to pick it up for a couple of my decks. The next card I think is absolutely insane as well. I keep saying that. Maybe I should calm down a little bit. Depth Shaker Titan. This is a 7 CMC artifact creature robot. It says when this creature enters, any number of target non-creature artifacts you control become 3/3 artifact creatures. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. It also says each artifact creature you control has melee, trample, and haste, which is absolutely insane. If you guys don't know what melee does, it means as long as you're attacking 3 opponents, all of your creatures are going to get +1 for each opponent you're attacking. So it essentially just gives all of your creatures +3. There's a ton of artifact creatures in this deck, and again, it animates all of the artifacts that aren't artifact creatures that turn, and effectively turns them into 6/6s. You could cast this guy and win the game fairly easily in this deck since we're on so many artifacts and artifact creatures. The next one is Long Range Sensor. This is a 3 CMC artifact. It says whenever you attack a player, put a charge counter on this artifact. Notably, it says whenever you attack a player, meaning again, if we attack every single player, we can put up to 3 charge counters on this per combat step, which I think is pretty useful. Then we can pay 1, remove 2 charge counters from it, and discover 4. You can activate this only as a sorcery. Discover 4 is exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with mana value 4 or less, cast it without paying its mana cost, or put it into your hand. So you're just getting card advantage by attacking your opponents. Everybody loves that. Moxite Refinery, a 2 CMC artifact that you can pay 2 and then remove X counters from an artifact or creature you control, and then you get to choose one, activate only as a sorcery. Your choices are you can put X charge counters on target artifact or put X 1/1 counters on target creature. There is a way to win the game with this card later. Again, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but again, we're just moving around charge counters and putting 1/1 counters on creatures, which again, it's not hard to crew up one of these stations, put a ton of counters on it, and then turn all of those state or charge counters into just straight up 1/1 counters to kill an opponent. Or we're putting more charge counters on our broken cards that allow us to win the game with charge counters. Again, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Patrolling Peacemaker also has some pretty crazy wording to it. This is a 3 CMC artifact creature robot soldier. It says this creature enters with 2 1/1 counters on it, and then whenever an opponent commits a crime, you get to proliferate. It's also just not limited to once per turn. If you guys don't know what committing a crime is, it's whenever an opponent literally does anything to any of the other opponent's board state. So basically just like breathing and magic, and now you're proliferating. There's also cards in this deck that allow us to add multiple 1/1 counters to our entire board state. So now every time our opponent does anything to us or our opponents, we're just going to be able to buff up our entire board state, which is going to be pretty scary if you ask me. Solar Array is another new artifact. It's a 3 CMC artifact with a tap ability, add 1 mana of any color. When you next cast an artifact spell this turn, that spell gains Sunburst. Sunburst means an artifact enters the battlefield with 1/1 counters on it equal to the amount of colors you use to cast it. So you can Sunburst for 3 here and you get 3 1/1 counters, or I think even charge counters. Otherwise, it enters with charge counters. Yes, so if it's not creature, it gets charge counters. If it is creatures, you get 1/1 counters. Again, Kylo's looking like the commander to run here. Surge Conductor is another 3 CMC artifact creature robot that says whenever another non-token... Whoa. Whenever another non-token artifact you control enters, you get to proliferate. So again, we're proliferating a ton in this deck. Kylo is just going to add on to that, and we're just going to make a massive board of massive creatures with our 1/1 counter synergies that are also in the 99. I will say though, running the other commander is not going to be hard because we are going to be, or not going to be bad either, because we are going to be generating a board state that is going to demand removal pretty frequently. Uthros Research Craft. This is a 3 CMC artifact spacecraft. It costs 2 generic and a blue, and it says whenever you cast an artifact spell, draw a card, put a charge counter on this spacecraft. That happens at station 3, and then at station 12 it gains flying, and this spacecraft gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control. So solid card advantage whenever we're casting all of these artifact spells. I think this is going to see a lot of play in just regular artifact decks as well. I'm always looking for cards that allow me to draw cards whenever I'm casting the majority of these spells in my deck, right? In a Spellslinger deck, you want cards that say whenever you cast instant or sorcery draw card. This is that for artifacts, and again, I think it's going to see a decent amount of play in those artifact decks that want it, and I think there's a lot of artifact decks that want it. Almost every artifact, if you ask me. That's going to do it for all the new cards. Now let's get into what this deck is trying to do, if I think it's a good buy, and overall, what are the ratios? What's our card advantage look like? What's our removal look like? And do we even have any ramp? First off, I do think this is a good buy. I think this deck works straight out of the box. It's going to have a lot of options as far as win cons, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, and it has a clear game plan. We're putting as many charge counters and 1/1 counters on our board as possible, and that is going to lead us to victory in one way or another. And again, the fact that it has multiple options for victory, not just combat damage, I'm actually pretty excited to see in a precon. Whoever made these precons needs to keep making them for Wizards of the Coast, because the consistency is just everywhere. These are amazing precons that work out of the box, and if you just look at last sets, it's just not true, right? They're getting better, and I do want to give credit where credit is due. I like these precons, and they're pretty playable out of the box, which is super important for me whenever we're talking about a new player experience. If we want more people to get into the game of Commander, we need our precons, the thing that's supposed to get more people into Commander, to be workable. And these are, and I just wanted to say that in a video because I've been negative on precons in the past, but it was deserved, I promised. Anyway, this deck is going to have 11 card advantage spells. It has 10 new spells, which is awesome. It has 11 ramp and 10 removal. So all of the ratios are within range, I would say. A minimum is 10, 10, and 10, and I like to go a little bit above that, but hey, I can't complain because they're at least hitting the minimum, and I'm super happy to see that. Now, as far as the game plan goes, there is a lot of swinginess to this deck. You want to commit to the board with your artifacts and your artifact creatures, and then go ahead and win the game through just a massive board state. Let's talk about some of the win cons that we could see using in this deck. The first one we've actually already talked about, Depth Shaker Titan. This card is insane, and I'm happy to pick it up and happy to play with it. This is a 7 CMC artifact robot that is going to basically be the new Craterhoof Behemoth for all artifact decks that have red in them. It says when this creature enters, any number of target non-creature artifacts you control become 3/3 artifact creatures. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. It also says each artifact creature you control has melee, trample, and haste. That last part is just a static ability that doesn't go away. So even if you're playing a strategy that wants to play artifact creatures, we really don't care about the animation part. Melee is broken, haste is broken, and so is trample. So what's going to happen here, if you don't know what melee does, you attack, and then as long as you attack all three opponents, that's going to give every single creature +3. So that's where we're getting the Craterhoof Behemoth aspect. And then again, if we're playing a bunch of value artifacts, now all of those value artifacts are 6/6 creatures with trample and haste that are ready to kill our opponents. If you guys have decks that generate a lot of clues or a lot of treasure tokens, this can just turn all of your clues and treasure tokens into straight up lethal threats, and this deck is no different. Now, we're not creating a bunch of clues and treasure tokens in this deck, but we do just have a lot of artifacts that sit on the battlefield and generate mana and do other things, and now those mana generators can turn into a late game ender with this card, and I'm excited to see that. There's also ways to end out the game that do not involve combat damage, like Lux Artillery. This is a 4 CMC artifact that says whenever you cast an artifact creature spell, it gains Sunburst. This means if we cast it with 3 different colors, it enters with 3 1/1 counters on it. It then says at the beginning of your end step, if there are 30 or more counters among artifacts and creatures you control, Lux Artillery deals 10 damage to each opponent. It doesn't take long for that to add up and start killing your opponents, especially when we are adding 3 1/1 counters to our artifact creatures that we're casting. Threefold Thunderhulk is a way we can just kill our opponents with straight up combat damage. This is a 7 CMC artifact creature gnome that says Threefold Thunderhulk enters the battlefield with 3 1/1 counters on it. And then whenever Threefold Thunderhulk enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to create a number of 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens equal to its power. It then has the ability to sacrifice another artifact and put a 1/1 counter on Threefold Thunderhulk. This means we can just buff this guy up with our massive amounts of proliferation. We can even move 1/1 counters onto this guy and generate an instant board state ready to kill our opponents. The only problem is This one they are going to see coming from a mile away. So maybe if you want to lean into this strategy, the commander that gives all of your creatures protection is the way to go. I will say though, proliferating on this is also pretty broken. Titan Forge is another card that's pretty solid. It's a 3 CMC artifact that has pay 3, tap it, put a charge counter on Titan Forge. Then we can tap it and remove 3 counters from Titan Forge to create a 9/9 creature. That seems pretty solid. Do that enough times and you've got enough creatures to deal a massive amount of damage to your opponents. Cyberdrive Awakener does something similar to the Depth Shaker Titan, a little bit less explosive, but I'm still here for it. It enters the battlefield. It does give all other artifact creatures flying, and that is a static ability, so it works for all of our artifact creatures in the deck. And then it does also animate all of our non-creature artifacts into 4/4 creatures that now have flying. So it can be another way to end the game. More than likely, this is probably killing 1 player, maybe 2 players. And if the game has gone long enough, you could start axing players this way, but I wouldn't count on it as a win con 9 times out of 10 in this deck, just because it doesn't go wide enough with artifact tokens like, again, your clues and treasures. I want to play this in my deck where I'm going 10 treasures wide and then reanimating all of those treasures to deal a ton of damage to my opponent. But again, it's still solid in this deck. Moxite Refinery does have a win con with something like a Dark Steel Reactor. Dark Steel Reactor is a 4 CMC artifact. It does have indestructible, so it's going to be really hard to get rid of. And then it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a charge counter on Dark Steel Reactor. When Dark Steel Reactor has 20 or more charge counters on it, you win the game. Again, it's not hard to use a Moxite Refinery, a 2 CMC artifact that says you can pay 2 and remove X counters from an artifact or creature you control and then choose 1. You can either put X charge counters on target artifact or put X 1/1 counters on target creature. So we can go ahead and put a ton of charge counters on our ships that is not hard to crew up, right? All we need to do is tap 20 power worth of creatures. Then we take all 20 of those charge counters, put them on Dark Steel Reactor, and win the game. Is it kind of cheap? Maybe, depending on your, definition of cheap, but you did have to get up to 20 charge counters, but also I don't think that's going to be very hard in this deck. So those are some of the win cons you can kind of expect to play in this deck, and hopefully that gives you a more understanding of what you're trying to get to. I do want to talk about why I chose Kylo. I just loved the effects like Pented Prison and Crystalline Crawler. These are creatures that enter the battlefield, or an artifact that enters the battlefield and have charge counters on them, and then you can remove charge counters from them to add mana to your mana pool, or with Crystalline Crawler, you remove 1/1 counters from him to add mana to your mana pool as well. So you can just generate a ton of mana this way by proliferating a ton, and you can just keep putting more and more 1/1 counters on them. Yes, the other commander does that as well, but it does it a little bit slower. Again, it's kind of a toss-up, right? I do want to change the deck drastically to fit Kylo because there's not a lot of ways to tap him without going to combat, but again, the other commander does do a slow version and protect your board, so maybe straight out of the box you want to use your spacecraft, but then once you upgrade it a little bit, Kylo's definitely the more powerful commander. Lux Cannon's also pretty fun with Kylo. It's a 4 CMC artifact that says put a charge counter on Lux Cannon, then you can tap it and remove 3 charge counters from Lux Cannon and destroy target permanent. Straight up any permanent, lands or whatever. With those new broken lands, I think land removal is going to become more and more prominent, and this can remove lands if you have to, so I like it. Steel Overseer is also a big reason I think Kylo's super strong here. It's a 2 CMC artifact creature that allows us to tap it and put a 1/1 counter on each artifact creature we control. So now if we're going wide with all of these artifact creatures, we can just tap our Steel Overseer, they get bigger, and then we're proliferating with Kylo, and eventually we'll be able to attack with Kylo pretty easily because Kylo's going to be massive. That's going to be the main of the reasons I chose him. There's a lot more proliferation in the deck, but the main reasons are those cards right there, or those sort of cards, I'll say. There's a lot of 1/1 counter synergies here, and I just want to utilize it. We even have stuff like Techathal that says whenever you proliferate, go ahead and proliferate twice. So there's definitely a split down the middle of what commander you can choose, and I don't think there's a right or wrong decision here. I think they're both powerful in their own ways, but I did want to mention some cards that I would add to the deck if you are choosing to go the Kylo route. Like I said, we do just want to be able to tap him, and there's a lot of ways to do that. One, we have Honor Worn Shaku. This means we can tap a legendary creature we control, and that's going to add mana to our mana pool. Paradise Mantle straight up gives him the ability to tap and add mana to our mana pool, so now he's just a mana dork. Relic of Legends, again, we can tap a legendary creature, and it allows us to add mana to our mana pool. Basically, easy ways to tap him, right? That way, we don't have to go to combat. Springleaf Drum also does this pretty effectively. I did also want to mention this card goes infinite very easily with cards like Feed from the Real and Pimen's Aura. All we have to do is make sure we have a way to tap Kylo for mana, which I just listed 3 of them that are all easily tutorable in these colors. And then we equip them with these enchantments. These enchantments allow us to untap a creature for 1 mana. So now you tap them for a mana, untap them, tap them for a mana, untap them, and you get infinite proliferation. And then there's a ton of ways to win in the deck once we can infinitely proliferate. Again, one of them's that Darkstar Augur, or Darkstar Reactor, that's going to be a pretty easy way. Also just infinite mana with any of your rocks that tap for mana equal to the amount of charge counters on them. There's even cards in the deck that allow you to remove charge counters from a creature to draw a card, so you can kind of draw your entire deck as well. And then, I don't know, cast all your artifacts, play the giant Crater Hoof artifact that gives all your artifacts haste, and then attack for the win, right? There's a lot of ways to win with this guy if you want to go the infinite route. I don't know if I would go that route just because you won't make many friends that way, but if that's the kind of play group you're in, that's a solid way to turn this card into an absolute monster. I also wanted to mention Danny Pink here. He gives every creature the ability to draw a card whenever a 1/1 counter gets put on them. That means if we go ahead and proliferate, we get to put a 1/1 counter on our entire board state, and you're drawing a card equal to the amount of creatures you control every single turn. This card is absolutely insane. Some untapped synergies like Unwinding Clock, so our commander untaps, and then we can tap him every single rotation 4 times. That gives us the proliferation 4 times. Our creatures are going to get 4 1/1 counters on them. All of our charge counter stuff is going to get 4 counters on them. It's just, there's a lot of ways to really break this guy. Even Sting does the same thing. It's going to untap him every combat step. Then we have to tap him again. The only problem is, again, there's not a lot of ways to tap your commander in this deck, so you will have to make some upgrades so it doesn't feel super awkward, or you're just going to be attacking consistently during combat, and that's going to be the only time you're tapping your commander. Again, either commander's fine, but I just think Kylo's pretty busted here, so I gravitated towards him. I hope this guy's helped you in your deck building endeavors. I have been enjoying these Precon upgrades, and it looks like you guys have been as well. So if you guys have been enjoying them and want more like these in the future, please let me know in the comments down below. I will be upgrading this deck, and I'm probably going to be upgrading it thinking about Kylo, and I usually do some pretty aggressive upgrades. 25 cards. I did 23 cards for the Jund commander, and again, the Jund deck is playable out of the box pretty good, but I just thought 23 cards were more synergistic than the cards that were in the deck. So again, I make some pretty aggressive changes with my upgrades. If I've already done the Precon upgrade, I will leave it in the pinned comments down below. But with that being said, guys, hope this helped you. I'll see you guys in the next one.